So all of the things that we once attributed to God, we now began to explain with no reference to God at all. Tsunamis were not God's vindictive punishment upon sinful people. They resulted from the collision of tectonic plates well beneath the surface of the earth. Hurricanes were not because God hated New Orleans because Ellen DeGeneres was born there, as Pat Robertson suggested. They are caused by low-pressure systems traveling over warming oceans and increasing their fury. And we discovered that penicillin will cure the pneumonia of either Mother Teresa or Adolf Hitler without regard to their characters. And suddenly all the things that we once attributed to this supernatural, miracle-working external deity, we found other ways to explain. I have a close friend in England who was a former Christian and priest, indeed even a New Testament professor at the University of Newcastle. Not Newcastle, the University of Birmingham. His name is Michael Goulder. And in 1983, under the impact of these insights from the scientific world, Michael resigned from the priesthood, stepped outside his membership of the Christian church, announced himself to be a non-aggressive atheist, and continued to teach New Testament, which was interesting. And someone asked Michael, "Why have you become an atheist?" And he responded, "Because God has no more work to do." So if Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler rendered God homeless, Isaac Newton rendered God unemployed. And so the God who is defined as the bringer of salvation is no longer believed in by many. But surely, we say, well, we might have to redefine God. Surely we human beings need to be saved. We need to be rescued. We have fallen into sin, have we not? And that attitude toward human life makes an assumption, namely that we were once created perfect, and from our perfection we fell into a status for which rescue is required. Well, my friends, it was a lot easier to believe that prior to the work of Charles Robert Darwin. But if Darwin is correct, and there is no one in the learned circles of our world today who doubts that Darwin is correct, and DNA evidence makes it very clear that life is one unfolding whole, and that we Christians are not just kin to the great apes, we're even kin to the cabbages. Life is an unfolding reality, and we are part of that. There was no time when we were created perfect only to fall into sin. We are people who are emerging into life, into consciousness, and into humanity. This planet Earth appears to have been formed some 800 million years before the first evidence of life appeared on this planet. How life appeared, when it appeared, where it appeared, are shrouded in mystery, but we know it wasn't present about 4.5 billion years ago when this planet was formed. We know it was present about 3.8 billion years ago. And we know it is present in the form of a single cell. And we know that in the 3.8 billion years since life made its entry, it has emerged and evolved from single cells into its present form. That means we have not fallen from perfection. We are rather in the process of becoming human. That's a very different perspective. If we are not fallen, we need no rescue. Since we haven't fallen, we cannot possibly be restored to something we have never been. We are self-conscious creatures. We are not sinful creatures, fallen creatures, or lost creatures. We are emerging creatures who have not yet become fully human. I look out on this audience today and I do not see fallen sinners. I see incomplete human beings. There's an enormous difference. So underlying the claim that Christianity is a religion that brings salvation, we find a definition of God as an external being who can bring salvation, who is not part of the problem. We find that that definition has been destroyed. And the definition of human life has fallen from perfection, in need of rescue, lost, deprived, depraved. We find that definition has become inoperative. Does this mean that human beings are not capable of doing evil? Of course not. But it means that you have to explain evil in a very different way. It does not come from a fall. It comes from the fact that you and I have not yet become human. Now, that's a pretty terrifying thing for a lot of people to embrace. And quite obviously, everyone cannot embrace it. So when some people out of this traditional religious background look at these new facts that anyone can discover, unable to embrace what it means for their faith tradition, they simply repress this reality and refuse to engage these ideas. They step into their religious ghettos and they shout their convictions ever more loudly to the world, and they refuse to engage any of this thought. And we call them fundamentalist. And they come in both a Catholic and a Protestant form. And then there are other people in our society who accept these things as a sure sign that all of the presuppositions of all religion are somehow dying, and that there's no value there to be found. And so they step away from any religion. They take up citizenship in what Harvey Cox at Harvard called the secular city, and they join what I've called the Church Alumni Association. And they began to embrace what it means to live in a godless world, in a religionless world. And their name is Legion. Increasingly in the Western world, these are the two growing movements. Fundamentalistic churches are growing, and the non-religious secular population is growing. And the mainline Christian churches are in a statistical freefall. Now, between these two growing polarities about religion in the West, I think stands the unity movement, which seems to me to be offering a third alternative. Somehow, perhaps because of your roots in Mary Baker Eddy, but somehow you have broken free from the religious tactic of encouraging human degradation. Your worship is remarkably free of breast-beating guilt. Your worship is remarkably free of the kind of condemnation of human life that marks most religious traditions. I cannot go to my church without being forced to say things like, I have done the things I ought not to have done. I have not done the things I ought to have done. There is no health in me. Have mercy, have mercy, have mercy. Episcopalians say, have mercy on me 3 to 9 times in every worship service. It would seem that once would be enough. And sometimes we say it so often we decide to say it in Greek so it won't sound so bad, so we say Kyrie eleison. But it's still a guilt message of a groveling, fallen, helpless, hopeless creature to an omnipotent, powerful, rescuing, external, supernatural being. In my church, I have to say, I am not worthy to gather up the crumbs under the divine table.